Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every event in your life feels eerily familiar, not because of coincidence or déjà vu, but because the same emotional pain keeps finding new disguises. You tell yourself that this time will be different, that this new relationship, this new job, this new city will finally free you from the ghosts of the past, yet somehow the faces change while the ache remains. You keep ending up in the same arguments, the same heartbreaks, the same sense of emptiness when the excitement fades. And in the quiet hours when no one is watching, you can almost feel the echo of something ancient replaying itself inside you. It feels like you are trapped in a loop, not just of events, but of emotions, choices, and outcomes that seem to mock your attempts to evolve. You wonder if the universe is punishing you, or if life is simply cyclical, looping until some hidden meaning is grasped. What if every heartbreak is not an accident, but a mirror? What if pain is not random, but a coded message written in experiences, repeating until you learn to read it? The terrifying possibility arises that your suffering is not happening to you, but through youth, that your subconscious, in its desperate attempt to heal old wounds, keeps recreating them. Maybe you think of it as karma, or fate, or the mysterious will of the universe. But what if those names are just masks for something far more intimate, the architecture of your own mind designing a curriculum you keep failing to graduate from? You call it destiny, but it may be repetition. You call it bad luck, but it may be memory. Somewhere deep inside, a part of you is addicted to familiarity, even when familiarity hurts. Because pain, you understand, feels safer than joy you can't predict. The mind clings to what it knows, even if what it knows is suffering. Perhaps this loop began before you could reason, when a parent's love came with conditions, when silence felt like rejection, when you learned that to be seen you had to earn it, when your heart first learned to hide. Those early wounds became your blueprint for connection. And now, without realizing it, you keep building your life on that same flawed design. You fall for people who make you feel the same inadequacy. You pursue goals that mirror your early struggles for validation. And every time, you mistake the repetition for renewal. The pattern is cruelly elegant. Your mind recreates the pain not to punish you, but to offer you another chance to resolve it. But because you don't see it, you call it fate. And yet, there's another possibility, one that whispers from beyond the rational mind. What if this repetition isn't just psychological, but karmic? What if you are reliving lessons your soul hasn't yet mastered, carrying forward the weight of old choices and unresolved emotions that transcend a single lifetime? If that's true, then each loop of pain is not a circle, but a spiral, each repetition a chance to rise higher, to perceive the wound from a slightly greater height. But you resist it, because the lesson always comes disguised as loss, rejection, or failure, and the ego wants comfort, not growth. So you flee from the very pain that could free you, never realizing that by running from it, you drag it with you. Perhaps that's why the same story keeps finding you, no matter how far you travel, no matter how new your surroundings seem. Pain, after all, is not an intruder, it's a messenger. And until you listen, it has no choice but to knock louder. The question that now looms before you is not just why me, but why this again? Is the universe testing you, or are you testing yourself? Are you cursed, or are you being called? Maybe both, because somewhere within the repetition lies a hidden invitation to awaken, to see the loop for what it is, not a punishment, but a mirror reflecting your unhealed self. The real mystery, then, is not how to escape the pattern, but why you need it in the first place. Why do you keep repeating the same pain? Is it karmic or psychological, or perhaps both, interwoven like shadow and light, each forcing you to confront what you've long avoided? The answer waits, buried beneath layers of emotion and memory, whispering through every heartbreak and disappointment, urging you to finally ask the only question that matters. What part of you still believes you deserve to suffer? You've been haunted by the same feeling for so long that it's begun to feel like a feature of who you are. An invisible rhythm pulsing beneath every decision, every desire, every disappointment. It isn't just pain that repeats its identity itself. The self is a pattern, a constellation of memories pretending to be a person, and every memory carries emotion like static electricity, drawing toward it the same emotional frequencies in the outside world. You think you're choosing freely, but your choices are gravitational. They orbit the unseen mass of your unresolved experiences. Carl Jung once wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that single idea holds the entire architecture of the loop you keep reliving. The mind is not a straight line. It's a maze that folds in on itself, powered by emotion, belief, and longing. When an early wound lodges itself in that maze of rejection, a betrayal, a moment of shamit becomes the magnetic center of your life. Every new experience bends toward it. You mistake this for attraction, intuition, or destiny. But what's really happening is psychological symmetry. Your subconscious seeks to recreate familiar emotions because it knows how to survive them. A child who learns that love comes through struggle grows into an adult who confuses struggle with love. A child who learns that attention comes through pain becomes an adult who unconsciously courts suffering just to feel alive. The mind doesn't distinguish between what's healthy and what's familiar. It simply follows the grooves carved by repetition. Society reinforces this programming, rewarding performance over authenticity, achievement over healing, noise over silence. From the beginning, you're taught to look outward, to seek validation, belonging, and worth from others, and in doing so, you forget the original source of your pain. You become a mirror that only reflects what others see in you, and when those reflections vanish, you feel hollow, as though you never existed beyond them. This is the first lie the loop tells you, that you need someone or something to complete what's already whole. The more you chase completion, the deeper you entrench the belief that you are incomplete, and the loop tightens. You begin to decorate your prison, convincing yourself it's freedom. Every goal, every relationship, every high becomes a temporary reprieve before the old emptiness returns. The modern world thrives on this loop, selling you infinite distractions to avoid the confrontation with your own psyche. Endless scrolling, perpetual consumption, constant comparison all keep you from noticing that the real battle isn't with the world, but with the mirror of your own mind. Beneath all the surface noise lies a quiet terror that maybe the pain is you, that maybe, without the ache, you wouldn't know who you are. This is the second myth, idea that identity is inseparable from suffering. But look closer and you'll see it's not that the pain defines you. It's that you've mistaken endurance for existence. The psyche clings to its wounds because they provide a sense of continuity. Without them, who would you be? The ego's greatest fear isn't death, it's change. Because to change means to dissolve everything familiar, even the misery. That's why people say they want to heal, but secretly sabotage their healing. They crave transformation, but only the kind that doesn't require dismantling who they think they are. To truly end the loop, you must confront the terrifying possibility that the self who keeps suffering may not be real in the way you imagine. You've built a house out of stories about who wronged you, what you deserve, what you lack, and you live in those stories as though they're permanent structures. Yet the truth is, each story was only meant to be a doorway, not a home. The pain repeats because you keep refusing to walk through it. Instead, you sit down inside it and decorate the walls. The philosophers have called it Maya, illusion. The psychologists call it projection. The mystics call it karma. But they're all describing the same thing: the inertia of consciousness trapped in its own reflection. The universe, or perhaps the unconscious, doesn't punish, it mirrors. Every experience you attract is a reflection of the vibration you inhabit. And until you change the vibration, the reflection cannot change. The cruelty of this truth is matched only by its mercy. You are both the prisoner and the key. Every person who wounds you is a fragment of your own psyche wearing a face. Every disappointment a disguised rehearsal of a forgotten lesson. When you begin to see this, the world stops looking like a battleground and starts looking like a classroom, but a brutal one, because it teaches through repetition until understanding dawns. And so you start to see the hidden architecture behind every cycle, the same emotions wearing new costumes, the same dynamics written in different languages, the same heartbreak sculpted into new shapes. It's not karma punishing you, it's consciousness trying to evolve. Pain is the syntax of transformation, but before you can transcend it, you must understand its language. Why the wound keeps speaking through your choices. Why the self keeps returning to its own ruins for a sense of home. The answer is not simple, but the beginning of it lies in this: what you cannot feel, you cannot heal. Every emotion you've buried becomes a ghost that haunts your present, whispering through the people and events that trigger you. Until you stop running and finally face those ghosts, they will keep leading you in circles. And maybe that's the most paradoxical grace of the loop, that it doesn't end until you do the one thing you've always avoided. Listen. You start to notice the subtle ways the loop seeps into everything, the way conversations twist into familiar patterns, how the same tone of disappointment creeps into the end of every dream, the same silent resentment builds behind every smile. You wake each morning thinking the day is new, but it isn't. It's just yesterday in a different outfit. The city changes, the faces change, but the atmosphere of your inner world remains eerily identical, as though reality itself is built from the residue of your own emotions. You want to believe life is linear, that time moves forward and progress is possible. But what if time is circular for those who refuse to see themselves clearly? What if every unlearned lesson demands its encore? Every unresolved emotion patiently awaiting your acknowledgement until you finally stop pretending not to feel. You see, the loop doesn't only repeat in your mind that shapes your world. It curates the people you meet, the chances you attract, the energy you emit. It's as though the universe speaks in patterns, and you, unaware, keep reciting the same emotional mantra beneath your breath, summoning experiences that match your hidden frequency. The law of attraction may sound poetic, but it's mercilessly precise. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. And what you are is a collection of emotional programs replaying beneath awareness. A set of neurological grooves carved by years of repetition. Neuroscientists call it Hebbian learning neurons that fire together, wire together, meaning that every time you react to the same trigger, every time you fall into the same despair, the brain strengthens that pathway, making it easier for the loop to find you again. You're not cursed by fate. You're wired by memory. Each repetition of pain is a rehearsal in the theater of the nervous system, and you've become both actor and audience in a drama that never ends. You think you're choosing freely, but your choices are ghosts, made long ago by the frightened child you once were. And that child is still driving the car. Society, in its polished cruelty, rewards this blindness. It tells you to move on, stay positive, look forward, yet in doing so, it ensures you'll never truly heal, only suppress. Suppression isn't healing. It's emotional debt, and every debt must eventually be paid with interest, in the form of anxiety, depression, failed relationships, chronic fatigue, the slow erosion of your sense of meaning. You try to patch the cracks with distraction, success, spirituality, substances, or love. But the loop doesn't care what tools you use, it just adapts. You can meditate in the morning and manipulate by afternoon, pray for peace while rehearsing the same fears in your mind. Proclaim your freedom while secretly clinging to your old identity. The loop loves hypocrisy because it feeds on denial. As long as you perform healing without embodying it, the cycle continues. The shadow, the Jungian term for all you repress, feeds on pretense, growing stronger every time you deny its existence. You can chant mantras and read philosophy, but if you still avoid the raw confrontation with your inner patterns, the shadow remains your hidden ruler. Jung knew this, Nietzsche knew this. Even the ancient mystics whispered it through paradox. What you refuse to see controls you. What you face dissolves. But this realization is horrifying, because it exposes the illusion of victim. It means the suffering that shaped your life wasn't random, it was reciprocal. You participated in it, not consciously, but energetically, psychologically. The people who hurt you weren't just villains. They were mirrors, playing their part in your internal theater so you could finally see yourself. It's an unbearable truth, because it demands the death of your old narrative, the comforting story where you were wronged, unlucky, cursed by destiny. Yet that death is necessary, because the story is the cage. As long as you cling to it, you'll keep attracting experiences to confirm it. The ego loves consistency, even if consistency means misery. To break free, you must be willing to shatter the illusion of who you think you are, to dismantle the architecture of identity that's been built around the wound. But few are ready for that kind of demolition, because it means losing everything familiar, even the pain that once gave life its meaning. The paradox is cruel. Freedom feels like loss until you've lived it. The unseen consequences of the loop ripple outward into the fabric of society itself. Entire cultures are built upon collective wounds, cycles of fear, greed, domination, and shame repeating across generations. Nations reenact traumas the same way individuals do, disguising them as progress. Wars are fought under new flags, but for the same ancient insecurities. Economies thrive on scarcity because humanity hasn't yet healed its belief in notiny. Even religion, often born from revelation, becomes corrupted by the same ego it sought to transcend. The collective unconscious Jung's great insights, not a poetic metaphor. It's the psychological ecosystem we all share, and it too loops endlessly until consciousness evolves. The same loop that binds you personally binds humanity cosmically, a feedback system between fear and desire, pain and avoidance, birth and death. We call it history, but it's really just memory playing out on a grander scale. You begin to see how your personal loop is a microcosm of something universal. The same laws that govern your emotional cycles govern the evolution of species, civilizations, and souls. What you suppress returns. What you deny repeats. What you resist persists. And so you live in a reality that constantly reflects your own unconscious, a reality that's both teacher and tormentor. Each moment is a test disguised as coincidence, each relationship a mirror disguised as love or conflict, each failure an invitation disguised as punishment. When you start to see this, the world becomes unbearably transparent, every detail charged with meaning, every pain revealing a pattern. It's both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it strips away the illusion of randomness. Liberating because it shows you that nothing is meaningless, not even your suffering. But now a deeper question rises from beneath the rubble of these realizations. If everything is a mirror, then who is looking? If your pain is a reflection of your consciousness, what happens when you finally stop identifying with the one who suffers? The loop only continues as long as the observer believes in the story. What if you could observe without clinging, experience without labeling, feel without fear? Would the pattern dissolve, or would you dissolve with it? These questions haunt you as you start to sense that the true prison isn't the world, or karma, or even trauma's identification itself. The self that suffers is a construct sustained by memory and repetition. If that self were to fall silent, even for a moment, the loop might finally collapse into stillness. But stillness is unbearable to a mind that has only known motion, a heart that has only known ache. So the loop continues, not because you're trapped, but because you're afraid to be free. And yet, somewhere deep beneath that fear, another force stirs a quiet rebellion, a whisper of awareness that begins to ask not, why does this keep happening to me, but what part of me keeps calling it back? That question, fragile yet potent, is the crack in the wall of eternity, the place where light begins to enter. The repetition is not forever. The loop exists to be transcended. But before that transcendence can come, the rebellion must awaken the courage to stop running and to finally look the loop in the eye. At first, the rebellion feels impossible. The loop is everything you've ever known, the rhythm of your existence, the architecture of your identity. How do you fight something that lives inside your bones, that beats in the silence between your thoughts? Yet rebellion doesn't begin with defiance. It begins with awareness. You don't break the loop by forcing it to, dissolve it by seeing it. Every time you witness a pattern without judgment, a fracture appears in its foundation. You start to notice the exact instant your mind reaches for the old story, the familiar reaction, the automatic fear. You pause. You breathe. In that pause, the machinery of repetition trembles. The loop requires participation. It feeds on unconsciousness, and when you stop playing your role, the script starts to fall apart. But awareness isn't enough. You must also surrender. Not the kind of surrender that feels like defeat, but the deeper surrender that feels like truth, the willingness to stop trying to control the narrative, to allow the pain to exist without resistance. The moment you stop resisting, the pain loses its meaning as suffering. It becomes sensation, energy, movement, something that passes through rather than something that stays. This is the beginning of liberation. To feel fully without drowning, to see clearly without clinging. In that clarity, you realize the loop was never punishment. It was the universe's way of teaching you to remember your own power. Each repetition was a riddle disguised as tragedy, asking one question again and again: will you finally wake up? You've lived so long mistaking control for strength, but the real strength lies in letting go, not in indifference, but in intimacy with what is. You begin to see that forgiveness isn't about excusing anyone's actions, including your own. It's about reclaiming the energy you've invested in resentment. The moment you forgive, you free yourself from being defined by the wound. The karmic cycle is nothing but the psychological inertia of unforgiveness of others, of fate, of yourself. The rebellion grows stronger as you start to question every belief you've inherited. You notice how much of what you call you was given by others' expectations, fears, traditions, collective traumas dressed as values. You've been living inside borrowed language, second-hand meanings, inherited pain. To rebel is to unlearn, to strip away everything that isn't yours. It's not destruction for its own sake. It's purification. You begin to feel that underneath all the layers of programming, there's a silent presence that's never been hurt, never been broken, never been caught in the loop. The mystics call it the witness, the self, the soul, consciousness itself. It watches everything, the pain, the joy, the cycles, but it is untouched by them. The more you identify with that awareness, instead of the wounded self, the weaker the loop becomes. You stop saying my pain and start saying there is pain. You stop saying I am suffering and start saying suffering is happening. That small shift in language is revolutionary because it severs the identification that keeps the loop alive. The ego resists this fiercely. It thrives on stories, and without them, it dissolves. But what it doesn't realize is that beyond dissolution lies expansion. The death of the false self isn't annihilation. It's resurrection. As the rebellion deepens, you stop seeking linear healing. You understand now that healing isn't about fixing what's broken, but remembering what was never broken to begin with. The loop is not an enemy. It's a mirror. Once you've learned what it came to teach, it no longer needs to repeat. You no longer need to replay the same pain, because you've integrated its message. You see that every heartbreak was an invitation to open, every failure a lesson in surrender, every loss a rehearsal for letting go. You see that karma is not retribution, it's repetition until realization. And realization is not intellectual, it's experiential, a moment when the mind bows before the heart and the heart expands beyond the mind. It's the quiet understanding that there's nothing to fight, nothing to earn, nothing to become, because you already are what you've been seeking. The rebellion isn't about escaping the loop. It's about transcending the need for it. When you no longer need pain to learn, life no longer needs to teach through pain. The same energy that once pulled you into suffering begins to pull you into presence. The same force that once created your nightmares begins to create your awakening. And then something extraordinary happens. The world itself begins to change. Not because it was ever separate, but because your perception was the filter through which it was projected. You see that reality was never objective, it was responsive. The mirror begins to reflect your inner freedom instead of your inner wounds. People who once triggered you now awaken compassion. Situations that once terrified you now reveal opportunities for growth. The loop collapses not with a bang but with a sigh, a quiet exhale that feels like returning home. You realize there was never any past life or next life, only the timeless continuity of consciousness exploring itself through infinite forms. Karma, psychology, destiny, all of them dissolve into the same realization. You were never trapped. The loop was love in disguise. And so, the ultimate truth emerges not as a concept, but as an experience, too vast for words. The pain you kept repeating was the universe's language for awakening you. It wasn't meant to punish, but to polish, to strip away everything false until only truth remained. You were never the broken one searching for wholeness. You were wholeness pretending to be broken so it could remember itself. Every heartbreak was a mirror, every mistake a compass, every ending a doorway. The purpose of the loop was never to keep you bounded, was to lead you back to the center where the loop never existed. You see now that the self who suffered was a dream, a necessary illusion for consciousness to know itself. The loop ends when the dream awakes, and when you wake, the entire landscape of reality shifts from repetition to revelation, from pain to peace, from seeking to being. You are no longer the character trapped in the story. You are the storyteller, the witness, the infinite silence from which all stories arise. There is no longer you and your pain. There is only awareness watching itself dance through form, endlessly creating, endlessly dissolving, free at last. And in that freedom, an impossible tenderness arises, not the fragile love that fears loss, but the eternal compassion that sees through all illusions. You understand now that everything that ever hurt you was only trying to lead you here, to this quiet knowing that there was never anything to escape. The loop was not your curse,